The success of Maruti Suzuki, yes, you can attribute to a lot of things, to the leadership over there, but it's only one man, and that is Osamu Suzuki.
Osamu Suzuki, when he comes and he means business, and he would ask questions at every possible occasion, and something that will surprise you at any given point in time.
One thing he said, that if you want me to do this, I have to have 100% control of the project.
While he's good friends with friends, but he's also had difficult relationship with a lot of people through these years. I mean, the legendary ones with the Indian government, Volkswagen Group, GM.
Resource was so scarce at that time.
Absolutely.
That he really learned to be, in our word, what do you say, kanjus, and really thrifty. And, and his cost control, we know, is legendary. Hello and welcome to our weekly podcast, Deep Drive, powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now, this week, we pay special tribute to a man who has single-handedly shaped the course of the auto industry. We are talking about Osamu Suzuki, who passed away at age 94 last Christmas Day. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
I am Ketan Thakkar. Hormazd, what a man. As a child, I've grown up hearing India drives home in Maruti Suzuki. And one man that made it possible was Osamu Suzuki. You've got a pleasure of meeting him. Help us understand about him. And if not for Suzuki in India and the way the motorization started, how do you see the Indian automotive market then?
Yeah, I think first we need to start on the Maruti story, which actually is well documented. A lot of people have written about it on several occasions, on Maruti's 40 years, on Maruti's 20 years. We just talked about how Maruti came to be. So really everyone knows how that happened. It really is a fairy tale story, one of chance, of intrigue, worthy, I would say, of a Netflix series. A lot of protagonists there. Starts with Sanjay Gandhi, who died and then inspired his grief-stricken mom to go and get a national car company in his memory. And then she relied on, brilliant bureaucrats like RC Bhargava and V. Krishnamurthy to execute the plan. But, the hero in this was Osamu Suzuki because, frankly, Suzuki was an outside player right till the end. And, in the interview, we said that Osamu Suzuki, by chance, read about the Indian government's plan in India Today magazine that this was happening. When one of his executives was flying to Pakistan where they have a plant. And en route in an Air India flight, he saw this magazine and he reported it back to Osamu Suzuki. Osamu Suzuki sent him to the Indian embassy. They said, sorry, period for applications is over. Osamu Suzuki didn't accept that.
Wow.
He said he just kept knocking on the Indian embassy door until, they agreed. As it so happened, other manufacturers were not so, let's say, excited about partnering with the Indian government in a market that was completely uncertain. But Suzuki wanted to take that gamble. And it is really his doggedness and determination, just one man, Osamu Suzuki, that Maruti happened. Because if he didn't push, it's hard to imagine what would have happened if Suzuki hadn't really convinced the government to do the deal with them.
I think at that point in time, we had the likes of Peugeot looking at getting...
I think there were a lot of them. There was Volkswagen, there was Fiat at some point. But, government had these things on phase manufacturing, a lot of transfer of technology. They were not really convinced of India as a market. It had not even really liberalized at that time. Don't forget, liberalized happened in 91. We're talking about 10 years earlier.
Right.
So I think, it was quite, let's say, fortuitous that, Suzuki happened. And I mean, when you look at scenarios of what ifs, one can only imagine what if Suzuki wasn't as persevering or as determined as he was. What would have happened to Maruti? They might have tied up with maybe Fiat, or we would have had Fiats at that time, or Volkswagens. Maybe the Golf at that time, or the Polo, which I don't know how the market would have panned out. I doubt it would have been as democratized. I doubt any of those cars would have given the affordability. I doubt any of those cars would have put an entire nation on wheels the way the Maruti 800 did. The Maruti 800 was the wonder car. I mean, interestingly, it wasn't a car designed and conceived for India. It was, as Suzuki himself says, it was his first big car when he took over as president in 1978, and really their only car.
Wow.
And, with that, he was confident of going to a market like India. And that's what happened.
I recall the conversation we had with Mr. Bhargav, and how Mr. Bhargav recalled during our interview recently that the first time they met Osamu Suzuki, he didn't even sit. He was not wearing suit. He was in his full sleeve shirt, and he was standing, and he had real clarity about where the factory is going to be, how big the factory is going to be, what kind of car it is going to be, how they're going to be progressing.
In fact, he says in an interview that Bhargav and, I think Krishnamurti had come, and he had to shoot off to America because he was signing a very important deal with GM at that time. He was partnered with GM, goes back really to the early 80s. So he kept them there, made them tour around the factory, and then came back, and talked to them. But I think one thing he said, that if you want me to do this, I have to have 100% control of the project. I will do everything, but you have to give me 100% control of the project. So I think, his desire for control was obvious even at that point, though the JV was just 26% for Suzuki and 74% for the government of India when it started. But, as they increased their stake, finally, which we'll talk about later, there was tussle between the government and Suzuki for control of the company. So really, Suzuki has always been a control freak. And he made it very clear that, if he is to set up this plant, he would, do it with total control.
On his own terms.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, help us understand about him as a personality, Hormazd. You've seen many different Japanese CEOs. What differentiates Osamu Suzuki from some of the others?
Well, I've just met him once, to be honest, but that was possibly in my entire career of covering the auto industry and meeting, let's say CEOs. I think that made the deepest impression on me, the kind of person he was, very warm in the interview, very, very relaxed, very frank, and he was really kind. He even autographed a picture of my own personal Maruti 800, which I still got up on my wall, which I'm really proud of. It's now really like, something to me to be treasured. So he was very accommodating and spoke very frankly. And I think the sense I got is because I asked him, about India, how did he adapt to India? And, we chatted on a lot of things, even looking at the poverty. He said, look, when I see the poverty in India, I can understand it. He said, because I grew up in post-war Japan.
Oh.
He was born in 1930. So when the war was over, 45, Japan was devastated. He was a teenager. He was saying there were a lot of poor people around. He said even the road between Osaka and Nagoya was just a dirt road. Today, you can't imagine that. It's a super highway. So he really grew up in an environment where there was a lot of hardship. He had to go through live in a country which had a ravaged economy. And I think that's what forged his character to a great extent, of doggedness, of determination, and above thrift, because resource was so scarce at that time.
Absolutely.
That he really learned to be, in our word, what we say, kanjus, and really thrifty. And, and his cost control, is legendary. It's kind of defined, the company, I think. And the way he can make profits with small cars is just unbelievable. No one else can. And in fact, that I think in a way has become such a huge barrier in the Indian auto industry that global players have just, been unable to compete.
Absolutely.
Just with the way Suzuki can control costs and control really, the small end of the market, which is really the core of the market. So I think as a personality and, very determined guy, a feisty guy, we've seen he's taken fights with everyone, does not scare even the Indian government. I mean, who would think of picking a fight with the Indian government? Today, definitely not. But, even back then, openly attacking them for what he felt, were serious issues. At that time. I think, but I think at the end of the day, he had an affinity for India. And talking to him, he spoke of a very interesting story, which not many people know about, which actually predates Maruti. It goes way back in 1969. When there was an Asian rally going through India and I think ending in Bangladesh. So at that time, it was easy to cross borders, not a problem. And there was the Suzuki Fronti SS, which is a really compact car. I think it was 360cc or something.
Wow.
Top speed of 110 kilometers at that time. But guess, wind got out that, this rally was there, and guess who saw the car? A very young Rajiv Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi.
Oh, wow.
And they were shown the car. Obviously a representative from the Gandhi family. Their mother was prime minister at that time. So Suzuki obviously obliged the representative. Osamu himself wasn't there, but he tells the story. And they had a look at the car, took it for a spin as well. They were very impressed. And apparently Sanjay Gandhi, who just come back from the UK, wanting to have this ambition of setting up his own company, which was Maruti at the time, showed interest in this car. But Suzuki had its own problems. They were trying to survive. They'd gone through a lot of stress in the mid-70s. And it was only in 78 when Osamu became president that he could have, look at international markets. Until then, it was just surviving in Japan. So, as he said that, that meeting, it was just so fortuitous that who would have thought that, a decade and a bit later, 12, 13 years later, that we would be in India.
Now, it's phenomenal as to how that chance of first the magazine in the aircraft, and then second, getting to know that there's a rally happening.
Yeah, that was earlier, exactly.
Yeah, and as to how these chapters, in a way, told Osamu Suzuki there's a possibility of getting into the Indian market.
Yeah, that's right.
It's phenomenal. Hormazd, there were different eras of Osamu Suzuki and India. I mean, there was this pre-liberalization era, post-liberalization era. I mean, I'm quite curious to know about this chapter with the Indian government.
So I think the golden days were really in the beginning when, to be honest, with Indira Gandhi wanting to make this company for her son Sanjay, instead of getting red tape, which government normally gives you, they got a red carpet. So clearly they had an advantage there. Whatever people say, it was a monopoly. They got preferential treatment. Other companies didn't get licenses to make cars. It was all pre-91, so, it was a closed economy. A lot of regulation at that time. A lot of people had applied to do joint ventures, Escorts with Citroen for the 2CV, Tata for the Accord. With Honda to make the Accord. So everything was rejected at that point constantly. Even Mahindra were trying with Chrysler at that time. They didn't get it. So clearly, they were the favored lot, and, they took full advantage of it. And more than that, the car was absolutely amazing. And, the 800 was Osamu Suzuki's favorite car. He says that in his interview. This is my favorite car. This is the car that made Suzuki. It really speaks of the philosophy of Suzuki, the man, the company, which is frugality, keep everything, let's say, not minimal, but, just give the right amount to the customer in a very affordable package, a very reliable package, a very fuel-efficient package, which is what the 800 did. And we know what the 800 went on to. It was like a wonder car, super reliable, very easy to drive. And it really was the philosophy of Suzuki. And Suzuki also says that his experience with motorbikes, really helped him develop small cars, because when you're working with motorbikes, you're working in confined spaces, small dimensions, and he said even with the supplier base it helped him. He did say that in the interview I had with him. And I remember once we were doing a story on the new fuel injected Maruti 800 for at that time BS2 was coming in 2000, and we were shooting this cylinder head, this 4-valve cylinder head of the 800. I mean, it was like a work of art, 4 valves packaged into a very tiny, let's say combustion chamber, and it was just managing these small places so perfectly. And obviously that precision, that ability to, let's say, engineer within very limited confined spaces and to a cost has come out of, their experience with bikes. And, it really is reflected in their cars. So that's really been the ethos of Suzuki, the man, the company himself. And I think those early days were really, great days for them, because Osamu Suzuki himself says that, he supervised the concrete being poured when the plant was coming up in Gurgaon.
Well, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, so that's how involved he was. I mean, and I tell you, after that meeting, you realize that the success of Maruti Suzuki, yes, you can attribute to a lot of things, to the leadership over there, but it's only one man, and that is Osamu Suzuki, because he had a control right down from, I would say, 30,000 feet from the right down to the shop floor. That's how brilliant he was. And his, let's say, attention to detail for minutia was phenomenal. And I mean, if you've got a guy, standing in the night when concrete is being poured in your factory, I mean, what does that tell you of the guy?
Phenomenal.
And, he's been to India. At that time, he said 200 times. Maybe that was about 10 years back when I met him. So you add another 20, 30 times after that, maybe 250 trips to India. So he knows India inside out. And I think what it also tells you, I mean, I don't think there has been a longer serving CEO of any company. I mean, you have Ferdinand Pick, you had Henry Ford, who've really had long innings like that. But so has Osamu Suzuki. I mean, you think of it, 40 years at the helm. And it's that sort of continuity which is really the success of a company. Because, Ketan, you know how the multinationals are. I mean, to me, Skoda is a classic example. One guy comes, sets up something, a new guy comes, wrecks it. Then you get a new guy come, and you know how it is. When you have this sort of, let's say, disruptions in leadership, it has an impact on the company. And I think the Suzuki Bhargav combination, to me, and that bond has been something that has really worked brilliantly for the company. So that's really something which is amazing. And the fact that, Mr. Bhargav, also 90 years old, has been for the company just as long. The Indian guy with Suzuki, the owner. I mean, it's just been a phenomenal kind of, let's say, stability of leadership on all fronts.
Hormazd, Suzuki, in fact, came down for Mr. Bhargav's 90th birthday, isn't it? And he wrote a heartfelt letter as well.
That's right. I think, after Suzuki-san passed away, I think Bhargav-san wrote a very, very touching note, which I think, we can put excerpts of that up on the screen for you. And really, you could sense, the deep personal loss, like a brother had been lost.
Oh.
And, in fact, I spoke to Bhargav-san, and he was so touched with Suzuki-san coming. Don't forget, this was just in July, end of July. I think July 30th is his birthday, if I'm not mistaken. And he came down, he flew down from Japan then.
Wow.
He wasn't well. I think Suzuki-san had lost his voice. He was unable to speak. And, but against all medical advice, stubborn as he is, right till the end, he said, no, I have to be down for Bhargav-san's birthday. And it was his decision alone to come down. And that just tells you of the man, and it tells you more of the strong bond between, these two 90-year-olds, which is amazing that, there's nothing like this in the history of the auto industry, that you had such a long association, of two people, representing fundamentally one, the Indian company, and then, of course, the parent company for such a long period of time. And I think that really is one of, or possibly the important reason for the company's success. It's this continuity of leadership at times. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes always people say that you need a change as well. There's a counter to that. But I think in Maruti's case, the way the company has, been the dominant market leader for so long, it's a formula that's worked.
Now, 2-3 key things, Hormazd, while you were talking, just came to my attention. Talking about bonds, I believe when Japan was going from Euro 1 to Euro 2, I think Toyota bailed Suzuki Motor out. And today we see how Toyota and Suzuki are such a significant partners with each other.
That's right. I think out of all the, let's say, fractured and acrimonious relationships which Osamu Suzuki has had, and he's had a lot of them, I think at the end of the day, the one company he has, respected a lot is Toyota. And I think there's a lot to do with that. I think it was at one point, I think in the 70s, where the emission regulation changed. I don't know what it was. I think I'm not sure what it was, but clearly Suzuki was making 2-stroke engines for its cars at that time, and you needed 4-stroke to meet the new emission norms, which the company didn't have. And Toyota bailed them out. They gave them engines.
Phenomenal.
I mean, just imagine that, a big daddy competitor giving a small one. But that's Japanese culture for you. That's how it worked. So I think that respect was formed over there. And I think at the end of the day, however, let's say, independent. And independent Suzuki was, I think he saw the writing on the wall, the way the world has changed with electrification, primarily hybridization. There's no way he could invest. A company so small would have the resources to invest, in the billions of dollars you need for electrification and keep your ICE going. He knew the only way was to partner with a company. He saw the writing on the wall, and that's why I think he got into this association with Toyota. And I've heard on good authority that uh, you know Osamu Suzuki had a meeting with Soichiro Toyota, who's passed away, and it was just understood that after that meeting, he just kind of informed his son Akio, "I met Suzuki," and all that meant is we have to work something.
Wow.
And today, if you
Amazing
see,
understanding.
and today, if you see it, even in India, it's possibly the most successful association.
Alliance.
It's not even a joint venture, it's just an alliance. The badge engineering has worked brilliantly, maybe largely in Toyota's favor to a certain extent because they've got a lot of benefit out of it. But, Maruti is going to get the benefit with the EV, which we will see. So it's really been one of those, let's say, joint ventures which has really worked well for, and I think it's because of that respect the two of them had. Suzuki had immense respect and even a debt of gratitude for Toyota, which is something he never forgot. And I think just like he was with Bhargav, it just shows the man, that he believed in a relationship. And if it worked, he would give his all, which even traveling at age 94.
Wow.
To when he was not well, and coming to meet him.
Interesting, Hormazd, while he may be fiery, independent, and really productive, but he was really a people's man. A friend tells me that once in an event in Japan, where Suzuki usually have their conference at the Hotel Grand in near its headquarters, and one of the executives of Suzuki informed Osamu Suzuki that the head of so and so company is coming, and he's a big fan of Suzuki, and he actually drives Wagoner. So Osamu Suzuki was really surprised by it. And eventually, after the meeting happened, he said he's the owner of a big beer brand. And why should he be driving a Suzuki? I mean, he can definitely afford a bigger brand and a bigger car. Just to reconfirm, while after the man, the head of the company went, he actually peeped outside.
He would be very suspicious. He got to double check himself.
Yeah, he went to double check and he really saw the guy drove out of his Wagoner. And from then on, from that day onwards, whenever a Suzuki event happens in the Grand Hotel, it has to be that specific company's brand of beer. I don't know what brand is that, but it shows that if you are a friend with Suzuki, Osamu Suzuki, you're a friend for life. And, these are some interesting...
and we've seen that with Bhargav.
Yeah. It's phenomenal as to how, if he's your friend, he really stands by you during difficult times as well. So I mean, a really interesting story tells me so much about the man, about the vision, drive, but even the smallest things. Right, always, while he's good friends with friends, but he's also had difficult relationship with a lot of people through these years. I mean, the legendary ones with the Indian government, Volkswagen Group, GM. Help us run through some of those relationships and how he dealt with each one of them.
Well, absolutely. I mean, on the flip side, he's someone you don't want to cross or you don't want to upset him. I mean, I'll be honest, I think a classic example is... the late Jagdish Khattar, God bless his soul, to me, I think one of possibly, in a way, the sharpest MD Maruti had, and, did a brilliant job, taking over at a time just after the company was coming out of all its troubles, with the tussle with the government, market share was an all-time low, no new models. He just took the company with to new heights with great marketing acumen. But the minute Khattar said he wanted to quit and get into his new joint venture, he was persona non grata. And I believe he just lost all his friends in Maruti Suzuki, at least officially or outwardly. And, I think the writing was on the wall. Osamu-san was upset with him. And, it was kind of pretty obvious in no uncertain terms. So, otherwise, again, people who've retired in Suzuki, they don't ever retire. They kind of moved into different advisory roles.
Absolutely.
And they keep continuing over there.
Right.
The thinking is you don't want their knowledge going anywhere else, so they keep them in the fold. That's how it is. And, feisty as he is, to me, look at some of the big fights we'd had with big, let's say, global conglomerates. And I think one of the, let's say, biggest spats Suzuki had was with Volkswagen, a big giant like Volkswagen. So, initially, Volkswagen bought about 19.9 or nearly 20% stake in Suzuki. But, and the whole idea was India was, let's say, a key kind of carrot for that. And I remember there were discussions on, and in fact, we had even done some scoops on what could have happened. The Suzuki A-Star was to have a Volkswagen badge. You should have a Volkswagen badged Suzuki A-Star, and there was to be a equivalent Skoda badge Wagoner.
Yes.
Because Skoda was all about space, so you give them the Wagoner, and and Volkswagen was to get the A-Star. They'd gone as far as that in India, and people were excited. But then things started going wrong. I mean, a lot of things started going wrong because I think firstly, Suzuki did not like Volkswagen typically wanting to own it. Volkswagen had so many brands. Suzuki did not like being treated as just another
brand out of so many
another subsidiary, another brand out of so many brands. You had Wintercon then, you had Peak then, all guys with big egos. And Osamu Suzuki doesn't have a small ego himself. And he took them on. And I think there were a lot of then accusations. Volkswagen was not happy that they were continuing with Fiat diesel engines. There were technical issues also at that time because I think if you see the Volkswagens also, the way their engines are designed, they had the manifold on the firewall side, whereas Suzuki has I'm talking about the exhaust manifold on the firewall side, whereas Suzuki had it on the radiator side. And, adapting that was going to be a huge technological challenge. These are some of the issues that they were facing. So it ran into a lot of trouble. And finally, it became quite messy with Volkswagen. They went into arbitration, and then I think the court ruled in favor of Suzuki that, Volkswagen had to sell its shares back to Suzuki, which Suzuki bought, I think, sometime in 2011 or so. So it was really quite a spat over there. Frankly, at the end of the day, Suzuki said, you may be Volkswagen, but you can't control me. I still want to be in control. And I think it's had a long association with GM also. Lots of ups and downs, but GM a little bit more freewheeling. More amicable. I remember Rick Wagoner saying, Suzuki is my absolute hero, largely because of his cost control at that time. And they're a lot more amicable. And I think in the end, it was a long relationship. They did badge engineering for each other in the US. They had joint manufacturing in Canada. Had a lot of association where both benefit. But I think at the end of the day, Suzuki got the better out of it. I think the other interesting association was with Daewoo. So, in the early 90s, Suzuki got into a partnership with Daewoo. The idea was they wanted Daewoo's global network. Daewoo wanted Suzuki small car expertise. They were developing a small car, the M100, which became the Matiz at that time, which came to India. And I think even Suzuki acquired a 15% stake in Daewoo at that time. And it got a little tricky because Daewoo came to India and the Matiz was head on with the Maruti products directly at them. But that's all fine. But what was interesting is that the Matiz used the same version of the 800cc engine, which was the F8C.
We had the F8D.
F8D and the F8D, which was a 2-valve. The Daewoo had the F8C.
Right.
But Suzuki refused to give them the engine, which was totally localized and manufactured from here, So they didn't want to give any of that advantage to Daewoo in India. So definitely, I think...
Fiercely protective.
People say he's a tricky guy to deal with, a very, very kind of, let's say, some would even say slippery. But, I think, honestly, I just admired that man immensely because, he was a David in a Goliath's world.
So, when did this challenge or problem with the Indian government start and what are the reasons, Hormazd?
So, I think, that honeymoon period was over, Indira Gandhi was gone. Then Rajiv Gandhi also was gone, and I think at the end of the day, interestingly, it was the Congress-led United Front governments that sort of started flexing their muscles, had their own ideas. So all started becoming an issue of control. So, I think they started meddling a bit too much. I remember Karunakaran going to Japan, having seen them, they said, why can't we localize gearboxes? That became a big issue, and people don't know that you need a certain volume to localize. It's not necessary. A lot of others were not doing it. So I think it really became a tussle for, let's say, control. And the thing is, Suzuki didn't take it lying down. He attacked them publicly. I believe he even wrote letters personally to influential editors trying to explain their point of view.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, that is something amazing. They were putting in big ads in the newspaper, so it really took the government head on. And really it was getting to a point where, frankly, the government was just meddling unnecessarily. They had no right, and by then, don't forget, the economy had liberalized. 91 liberalization came, 93 the car, let's say, industry was completely delicensed. So the whole question is, should the government be in the business of making cars or should they privatize?
Right.
So that's what was happening. And, I think it was ironic that he was fighting with the Congress-led governments, and that time Mursali Maran also, who came in as industry minister later, towards, in the late 90s, again, there were issues over there, and it was all about, who should be managing director. You had the government and Suzuki alternatively could appoint the managing director. Mr. Bhargava was in the crossfire. Then Bhaskar was there. I mean, all that's that's a story in itself.
The reconciliation, interestingly, was steered by a father.
Well, actually, it was, you say it was by the NDA government. I mean, who kind of, when the Vajpayee government was elected. So it's quite ironic, isn't it, that it was with Congress that Maruti was born, and the Congress-led governments that, they had this massive fight with Suzuki, and then it was an NDA government that had the reconciliation. So I think over there, when the NDA came in under Vajpayee, I think Sikandar Bakht was the industry minister, and my father was the attorney general at that time. And I think he impressed upon him that this is in no one's interest. Frankly, both had a case, it was going to go for arbitration. But best thing was to settle the matter.
Right.
And they did settle the matter. And I think by the end of it, finally, the net outcome was, I think, protracted over time. I think 2002 it was. I think Suzuki increased its stake to 54%. Government divested when public IPO happened, and the rest, they say, is history. Yeah? But, those periods were very, very challenging for the company because Suzuki then held on to the technology.
Absolutely. There were barely any products.
Absolutely. There was everything. There was an expansion freeze. There was, let's say, capacity freeze and product freeze. There was no product technology coming. I mean, and you can see it from Suzuki's point of view. Why should I give my technology, my products to a company I'm not in control of? And, we've got such an acrimonious relationship with a joint venture partner. So that was a very difficult period because don't forget, by then, a lot of competition was coming. Hyundai had come with the Santro, Daewoo had come with the Matiz, everyone and the uncle was coming in. So it was all happening at a time when competition was a thing. But, at the end of the day, I think one of the things which Suzuki has done is set a certain standard of people. I think that's what is there. And, you really got to hand it to him, just the way that they are trained. They go to Japan. Just the Suzuki way of doing things is just hard work. I mean, Suzuki himself, I think one of the secrets of the longevity is work, and more work with lots of sips of green tea in between, which is what I said. Because he honestly believed that the secret to longevity is just keep working. And, he'd keep, he had quite a sense of humor also, that, people would ask him. I remember once at a Tokyo Motor Show, I think American journalists asked him, Suzuki-san, what's your succession plan? I think the answer was a crisp, not dead yet, and walked off.
Now, I remember talking to one of the friends at Maruti Suzuki and asking him about Osamu Suzuki and his secret behind long success and how involved he was till the very late age. And
he was just a workaholic, right till the end. And I think that's what kept his mind sharp. It was as sharp as a razor. His memory was phenomenal. I remember that interview giving me exact dates when he met Bhargav and when Fisher in 1982 on this date and all, this is unbelievable.
This executive was reminding me as to how he was amazed to see one of Osamu Suzuki's interview about a couple of decades back, when one of the journalists might have asked him, when do you think you're going to be retiring? And he wanted to come out with a proverb, wanting to say in Japanese that, I'm going to die fighting. But of course, with the translator on, he said it was an English article which eventually said that I'm going to be dying with my boots on.
Yeah.
And he said that showed how much of commitment he had towards work, and that actually percolated right down to people on ground zero. And some of the stories that we hear about, how well he communicated even to people on ground zero, so that messages don't get lost in translation.
Absolutely. And I think, Ketan, if you look at it, I think everyone who's even left Maruti, and, there's some very senior exec, they've gone to other companies and done well. In other companies, yeah, you've got some brilliant guys at the top. Top layer is very good. But then you go a layer down, a layer below. The people over there don't have that capacity, competence or capability of someone in Maruti. Maruti, they're like an army.
Absolutely.
Of solid soldiers and workers, and that's what makes the country
of executives also.
That's a
factory for industry.
Exactly. That's definitely, and it's just the work culture. So, I think it's so well oiled. It's such a, I think it's just the people is such the heartbeat of the company over there. And, they're very efficient people. And I think that's why, the company, of course, it's got its challenges now.
Yes.
It's kind of missed a lot of trends. But I'm just saying the efficiency and productivity you get in Maruti is unmatched in any of the other auto industries, just down to its people.
No, it's what's phenomenal.
And that is Suzuki's true legacy. It's just how he's imbibed his own example, of just working in a certain way and very frugally.
Right.
Very frugally, and he's set it by example. Everyone has to follow that.
Right. I mean, I remember, our interview with Mr. RC Bhargava, 40 years of Maruti, and how he spoke about how this entire quality culture was brought in by Suzuki into India. While at one end, cost was definitely critical, but that did not come at the cost of quality. Recapping on some of the most interesting episodes of Osamu Suzuki, speaking to another senior executive, he reminded as to how on one of his field visits during the factory tour, he visited the paint shop, and he called the head of paint shop into a board meeting, and he actually asked him to remove his shoes. Suzuki was amused to see the amount of dirt that was there on his shoes, and he actually made the executive remove the shoes, and he showed the shoes to the entire board. If this is the kind of dirt that we have on our shop floor, just imagine the kind of quality of paint that the Indian consumers are getting in our cars. So and that began the drive of really cleaning up the entire ecosystem. That the famous personality was Mr. M.M. Singh, the head of paint shop. Then he eventually went on to become the director of manufacturing at Maruti Suzuki.
Yes.
And that just simple episode, showing the board that I'm watching in every possible nook and cranny of the factory.
Absolutely.
And showing him the shoes as to, what's really happening with the company. You got to better change.
And I think he would open drawers also, isn't it? Just to...
That's another phenomenal habit he had. I mean, whenever he would walk around in the office, he would open up people's drawers, because, whenever a big boss is in office, everyone would be prim and proper in right Maruti Suzuki dress. But he knew, people were just preparing for his entry. And then by opening up the door, if he finds the filth there, he would know. What is on the table, what is inside is very different. So he clearly meant that the culture of quality, culture of cleanliness, culture of discipline has to be imbibed. And that really transpired well down on ground zero, knowing that, Osamu Suzuki, when he comes and he means business, and he would ask questions at every possible occasion, and something that will surprise you at any given point in time. So it was phenomenal.
Yeah. And, I think, coming to the cost also, there's some phenomenal stories of legendary stories, obviously.
You had a stapler story.
Yeah, that's right. So apparently he'd come once to the office and maybe had a look around. Then I think after a couple of days, someone came collecting staplers. So they're asking what's happening. He said, Suzuki-san says every desk doesn't need a stapler. One stapler for 5 desks is good enough. How often do you use a stapler? So something like that. I mean, there are stories of him lowering the ceilings in the factory so that in the office of the air conditioning, you don't waste, you don't need additional cooling, which again means a high electricity bill. making, skylights as much as possible to let natural light in, so you don't have to kind of light factories up. So I mean, it's
My favorite story is of the chicken, Hormazd. That his favorite chicken in IT.
yeah, I remember telling you this. So I think while we were just having some small talk at the interview, and I think he loved the ITC in Delhi. That was where he stayed. Again, it's all about relations. He's just used to creature of habit in that sense. So he'd have his suite in the ITC, and he loved the Bukhara. He said he loves Indian food, and Bukhara was his favorite restaurant. But he mentioned that over the years, the chickens were getting smaller. So he was noticing their cost cutting as well. He had such a busy eye.
There's such fine eye for detail.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think, he's just an outstanding individual, and, I think a unique personality, which, I think, and larger than life. And, frankly, I think if you see it, he was in a way so indestructible. He's outlived many of his CEOs who've come in the past, and gone on and on. And, even his son, Toshihiro, I think, I remember once asking him, what's it like being Samu's son? He joked and said, very difficult. And again, I was just making small talk for him. This was just at the 2016 Delhi Auto Show, because I'd met Osamu-san in October 2015, and that memory was still fresh.
Right.
So I was just talking to, and we were doing an interview with Toshihiro-san, which is there on YouTube, and just making some small talk with him again before, and saying, your dad's an amazing guy. He's so fit and so alert, and just joking. What does he eat? Without batting an eyelid, he said, people. So, he may not have, the thing, but it certainly has his dad's sense of humor, and that summed it up so well, that the larger than life personality Suzuki was, and he was really a person who was, enigmatic, a character, enduring, and, honestly, to me, I think as far as automotive leaders go, he is my absolute hero. The fact that the weight's punched above its weight, people might say, cars are, built to a cost. He's not lavish anything at them, but at the end of the day, he's giving customers exactly what they want. Maybe not more, but not less either. It's just exactly what you spot. Of course, there's a lot more competition right now, and things have changed. But I think what's remarkable is that throughout his life, he must be happy that his company stayed independent, which is really something very, very rare in this current world. God knows what's going to happen, after he's gone. One assumes that, Toyota is just going to probably, take more and more control eventually. But I think, it's just been an amazing legacy which he's left behind. And honestly, I think, it's just, there's going to be no other automotive leader like him.
No, but what's best for me is that India's got the best of Suzuki. Always. I mean, we've seen different eras of Suzuki globally. They've tried in all parts of the world. They've had to eat a humble pie in US, in China. They've had to exit those markets. But in India, they moved on from strength to strength. Like you said, of course, there is a challenge right now, and they've doubled down on India. I mean, probably the biggest ever investment, biggest ever capacity expansion happening in India. Now the focus on hybrids and EVs, and all along the guys' vision was there that it is going to be multi-fuel, and it came right from the top. And clearly Suzuki will evolve with time. And I think the overt focus on India has really helped Indian market and in defining the Indian automotive industry, so to say.
Absolutely, and we've really been privileged to see this era of the automobile industry with people like Osamu Suzuki. I'm personally very privileged to have met him, spent a fair amount of time with him, and got to get some deep insights into a man who I think, for me has been my biggest hero in the auto industry. And with that, we'd like to end this episode of Deep Drive. Hope you've enjoyed it. And to stay notified and to make sure that you don't miss us every week, which is Saturday at 11 a.m., don't forget to click on the bell icon to be notified. Thanks for watching.